bago tayo mag-briefing, mag-i-intro muna kami, okay? Magandang umaga po mga kaibigan. Tayo na sa isa na naman pagtatanghal ng ating tapatan sa Aristocrat. Pag-uusapan natin, mas malalim na pag-uusapan natin yung build, build, build at kung paano ito magaganap. We invited DPWH, we invited NEDA, but we invited other resource persons to be with us. Kasama po ang Department of Finance. Narito rin po naman ang dating Undersecretary ng DOTC at isang financial analyst. No? At marami tayong mapapag-usapan. We're joined today by Assistant Secretary Antonio Silito G. Lambino II. Siya po ay original na kasama ng Smoky Mountain. Pero after being with Smoky Mountain, he studied abroad. At siya po ang Assistant Secretary for Strategy, Economics, and Results Group. Napakabigat na grupo nito sa Department of Finance. Kasama natin si Dr. Primitivo C. Cal. Siya po ay isang PhD in Transportation. At narito rin po naman si Ginoong Efren Choi Alas, isa po namang CEO ng isang pribadong kumpanya. At siya po ang chairman ng Philippines-Myanmar Business Council ng PCCI. Magandang pag-usapan itong Build, 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 which is the centerpiece program of His Excellency President Rodrigo Duterte. Now, if we are to go biblical, there is a saying, it's a biblical quotation from Luke. For which of you desiring to build a tower does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? So yan ang simula natin ngayon. Do we have the money to finance the build, build, build? Opening statements, please. Mr. Assistant Secretary, ito po yung microphone.
Magandang umaga po, Sir Melo, Dr. Cal, Sir Efren. Good morning po. At good morning po sa lahat ng nanonood at nakikinig sa atin dito sa Tapatan. Alam po ninyo itong Build, Build, Build program ay it's a very ambitious program that includes the aspirations of the Filipino people. Ang gusto ho talaga natin makamit ay inclusive growth. At alam naman po natin, infrastructure is a very important component of growth. What we need to do is make sure that that is inclusive. At meron po tayong programa, an 8 to 9 trillion peso program between 2017 to 2022. We're looking at 1.7 million jobs that will be created in the construction sector through 2022. At talagang gusto po natin makalat ang oportunidad sa iba't ibang lugar sa Pilipinas. In fact, if you look at the public investment program for 2017 to 2022, talagang makikita ninyo that our less fortunate regions, the lagging regions, have the highest infrastructure investment to GRDP ratios. Yung ARMM, yung Bicol, at yung Caraga regions. Of course, malaki pa rin yung share ng Philippine economy ng mga well-established economies in terms of regions such as Calabarzon, the National Capital Region, and Central Luzon. But what we want to do is make sure that the opportunities are not just concentrated in areas that are already developed. So, yun ho the Build, Build, Build program is, again, an ambitious program that seeks to spur inclusive growth in different parts of the country and different from the way we used to do it. Kasi kung gusto natin business as usual, pwede naman. No, na tulad lang ng dati, most of the resources go to Metro Manila and Calabarzon and maybe Region 3. But what we want to do is do development differently in the Philippines.
Very well. Mr. Undersecretary, Dr. Cal, how do you look at build, build, build projects, especially on the transport sector?
This is a much welcome development or program under the Duterte administration, because over the years, the gap between supply and demand has been widening. And we hope that through this program, we can catch up at least, narrow down yung gap between supply and demand. So this is really a much welcome development.
Okay.
Lelo. Yeah.
Thank you. Troy, ano tingin mo? Do we have the money?
Uh, my problem right now is because I was able to read in the newspaper that the money promised by China is not yet here or for release, no, and that's very important that that promise become a reality. During my time, I used to be finance officer of all these projects here in Metro Manila, the big ones, Reclamation, Marina, Ninoy Aquino International Airport, STEX, NLEX. I was the one who raised the money for that by the private sector.
By the private
CDCP.
sector.
It can be done.
It can be done.
Can be done.
Okay. For the information of our listeners and our viewers and colleagues in the media, Mr. Assistant Secretary, tell us, where will we get the money? As Jerry Maguire says in the movie, show me the money.
We're really looking at a financing mix na heavy po on the GAA. 66% from the budget, 18% from public-private partnership, yung sinabi po ninyo, and around 15% from official development assistance. Yun po yung ating target mix.
So, how, in heaven's name, can we fund this ambitious project? Will we get it from the Filipino people through taxes?
Part of it will come from taxes. Talagang we want, through the Comprehensive Tax Reform Program, more popularly known as TRAIN, we would really like to have a more equitable sharing of the costs of our public infrastructure and our human development investments. So ang dyan, ang gusto po natin from package 1 is for those who have more, who spend more on, let's say, gasoline. Alam po ba ninyo na 7 out of 10 liters are consumed by the top 20% of the population, primarily because they own private vehicles. Kaya the excise on oil, even though nasabayan ho ng pagtaas ng presyo ng ating oil imports and the exchange rate, the depreciation of the peso, the 3 pesos per liter, that is the excise plus the VAT on excise for gasoline, and the 2 pesos and 80 centavos for diesel, that is still in principle a very progressive tax. Dahil po, 7 out of 10 liters, ang bumibili po niyan, ang nagkukonsumo po niyan, ay yung top 20% ng population. In fact, the top 10% of our population, in terms of income, consumes 50% of our petroleum products.
Thank you. Dr. Kal, isn't that an indictment on the national government for its failure to do its job in mass transport, that people had to resort to private cars?
Yun na nga. Yun na nga ang problema. Behind na tayo sa pag-implement ng mass transit system. Kaya yung sinasabi nating traffic congestion in Metro Manila estimated at over 3 billion pesos a day. Imagine, no? Economic losses is mainly due really to the lack of attention to mass transit system. So kaya dahil yan, walang alternative yung private car owners. Sasabihin natin, kaya may number coding. But what's the use of number coding? In fact, number coding in itself is a poor traffic restraint measure kasi my research has found out that car owners just buy another car, and that's worsening the situation. But even then, even if, let us say, we replace that with a more effective mission, hindi rin timely kasi walang alternative, a good alternative ang private car owners. So the best alternative should be the mass transit system, in particular the rail mass transit system, which we are now behind in implementation.
And Melo,
Okay.
if I may add,
Please.
I think the government doesn't realize that it is a must that the government should own the mass rapid transit. In developed countries, they're all owned by the government. It cannot be the private sector.
Really? Okay. Siguro we can go into particulars about the sourcing of funds Please go ahead with your train presentation.
But just to add a note on what's been discussed, we really want to improve our rail system. Kaya po, under the Build, Build, Build program, we have a number of rail projects, including a rail system in Mindanao.
Okay. We're not talking of the railroad in the House of Representatives and the Senate, no?
Kanho, talagang mass transit rail po.
Okay. Because they usually say merong Pangasinan Express noon at iba pa, may Davao Express at iba pa. So that's not our topic today. Please go ahead.
Sige po. So as you can see, what we really want to accomplish is a more just, equitable, fairer system that is funded primarily by the Filipino people. Yan po ang ating train to progress. Nasabi ko po kanina, just to foreshadow what will be in the latter part of this presentation, that not only are we asking those who consume more to contribute more, there are other packages in the tax reform program. For instance, package 2, which is about corporate tax. And we are really asking those who have more capacity to contribute more, those who have less to still contribute, but not as much. Package 3 is about land valuation. And the request again is that those who have more contribute more to national development. Those who have less still contribute, but not as much. And package 4 is about financial and interest income. So yun po yung mga magkakasunod na packages. President Duterte gave the marching orders that they be passed in succession, hopefully this year. So, what are we already enjoying from train? Because that's one thing I think that we don't talk about enough. Napag-uusapan po yung mas mataas na presyo, this one, yung the small contribution to inflation, and the mitigating measures that are designed to help the poor. But I'd like to start with what are the benefits we are enjoying. And just quickly before that, please let me share again that TRAIN is just an acronym. Of course, it is a mass transit metaphor, but it is also an acronym for tax reform for acceleration and inclusion. And acceleration refers to economic growth, that we would like it sustained and fast. And inclusion meaning we don't want any Filipino left behind. We want to develop our cities, of course, but also our agriculture, and especially to make these contributions for the future of our children. So, what will we achieve by enabling fast, sustained, and inclusive growth? By 2022, what we would like to do is bring our poverty rate down to 14%. Last time it was measured was in 2015. It was at 21.6%. Essentially, that means lowering our poverty level by 1 million people per year. So that's lifting 1 million Filipinos from poverty every year. And then by 2022, the goal is to be a high middle income country like Thailand. By 2040, this is the ambition natin 2040 of NEDA. We would like to have a zero extreme poverty rate. You know what? When I was growing up,
It was some time ago lang, ano?
when I was in school, the tendency, and I went to a Jesuit school. The tendency was to romanticize poverty, a preferential option to make sure that we make choices in life that will benefit, lower income families and communities. But it's only recently, relatively, that I realized the most inspiring preferential option for the poor is to imagine a future that has no more extreme poverty. It can be done within 18 years because that's 2040, and then we become a high-income country, similar to South Korea. They did it in 15, so it can be done. So, what do we get today? Because that's for the future. No, that's 2022, 2040. Today, we already, starting in January of this year, have given 99% of income taxpayers higher take-home pay. It's essentially a 14th month pay. So if you look at, for instance, the income of a public school teacher or a call center agent, let's say they're making 21,000 a month, it's like giving them an additional 21,000 for the year, which is around 1,750 pesos a month, no, in additional take home. So that's cash in the pocket for 99% of income taxpayers in the country. We are supporting health objectives of the country. We have a new excise on sweetened beverages because, as we know, the overconsumption of these products is really not healthy, and actually leads to high costs in our public health system, such as diabetes, no? In the future. So, we have sodas and powdered juices that are mostly made up of sugar, now having an excise tax. We also have a higher excise tax on tobacco products. As we know, I don't think anyone will dispute that smoking is bad for your health. Tapos, binaba rin po natin yung estate and donors tax. Ito po, hindi po napag-uusapan masyado, but actually, yung mga pamilyang nauulila, when the parents pass away and the children are left to deal with the pain of losing loved ones, they also have to deal with the estate tax to transfer titles to their names, from their parents' names. And it used to be 20%. So now it's 6%. Starting January of 2018. And the goal is, of course, to help the families. Also, at the same time, to unlock a lot of unproductive land. No? So actually, there is a follow-up bill called Train 1B, Package 1B in Congress, that will extend this retroactively through an amnesty, but also to lift absolute bank secrecy. There are only 2 countries in the world that have absolute bank secrecy. It's the Philippines and Lebanon. So it's time for us to reform that. And also donors tax for charitable giving used to be around 15%. Now we're at 6% as well. In terms of money in the pocket, I mentioned earlier the personal income tax reduction. That's 12 billion pesos a month that the government does not collect anymore. But there are more things that people are able to treat as additional income, almost. No? So for instance, unconditional cash transfers for 10 million recipients, that's 2 billion a month. Free tuition in state universities and college is 3.5 billion a month. And infrastructure jobs, we are now spending more than 50 billion a month on infrastructure. That's if you compute wages at 30% of that, that's an additional 15 billion in new wages from infrastructure. So total is around 32.5 billion pesos a month in people's pockets, in the pockets of the Filipino people, which is a good thing in terms of the ability to buy the things that you need. But it's also important to note that that's quite inflationary. That's a lot of money going around trying to buy the same goods that are available in the market. Kaya sinabi po ninyo kanina, sir, it's a good thing for our infrastructure program to support manufacturing, to support the supply side, para ho makahabol ang supply dun sa demand. Dahil maraming ang pera ang sambayan ng Pilipino because of these reasons.
Okay.
So what are we seeing now? We're seeing a lot of infrastructure projects in the provinces. A lot of people focus on the flagship projects, the 75 flagship projects under BBB. More than 40 of which are actually already in different stages of engineering designs and financing, planning, and the like. But what we're seeing really, and umikot po ako galing po akong Davao, we did a land trip to Cagayan de Oro, and also in the north, no, I drove around Nueva Ecija. We're really seeing infra after infra after infra project at the provincial level, no, and at the local level. And while the major flagship projects are good for our economic growth, we should not, or we should keep in mind, I think, that it's also our fellow Filipinos in the provinces who have to benefit from this new infra. So, kita po natin, in 2018 alone, we're looking at more than 93,000 jobs in the construction sector from all of this build-up. I mentioned earlier that's around 15 billion pesos in wages per month. Sec Liling Briones said that we are well on our way Sekriling from DepEd, said we are well on our way um, to going beyond the target of 27.7 million students this year. Last we checked, it was more than 26 already, around 26.6 million students in the learners information system of DepEd. And why does this matter? It matters because of the explanation. Sec Liling said, why are there record numbers of enrollments in preschool and in primary school? It's because families are not in survival mode anymore. They have enough money in the family budget to send their kids to school. So, yan po ay marami hong nagbebenepisyo talaga sa karagdagang pera sa bulsa. But of course, there are those who are hurting from higher prices. Not everyone has more money in their pocket. And so here's a bit of an explanation on the latest inflation number, which was June 2018. So what are the facts about inflation? Because there's a lot of misinformation, exaggeration, and confusion about this issue.
Yes.
Year on year, the inflation rate for June was 5.2%. And I think most people do not realize that this is a year-on-year comparison, meaning it's what we paid in June 2017 versus what we paid for a set of goods in June 2018. So let's say you have a basket of goods, you're buying fish, rice, meat, fruits, your transportation costs, they're all in this basket. And you're paying 100 pesos, for every 100 pesos that you paid in June 2017, because it's a 5.2% inflation rate, you're paying 105 pesos and 20 centavos in June 2018. That's for every 100 pesos.
Okay.
Of the 5 pesos and 20 centavos, what is attributable to train is 40 centavos. So that's because of the excise on oil, excise on sweetened beverages, and higher excise on tobacco. Doon po galing yung 0.4 percentage points sa train. It's also important to note that a month-on-month inflation, which is closer to the lived experience of a consumer, because it's what they paid in May versus June. Diba? Or April versus May. Month-on-month inflation between May and June was less than 1%. It was actually 0.6%. So, meron hong drivers yan. I'll get to them in the next slide. From Jan to June, the year-to-date is 4.3%, which is slightly higher than BSP's target of 2 to 4%. And it is moderate compared to the historical average of 5% in the first decade of the 2000s, and 10% actually in the 1990s. So what are the primary drivers of inflation? In June, it was electricity. If you look at Meralco's rates, they were much higher in June 2017 compared to, in June 2018 compared to June 2017. And there were adjustments throughout that period. Kaya ho naramdaman talaga natin yung pagtaas ng presyo sa kuryente. But actually, it's important to note that the application for the rate increases were made before train was even being implemented. Kasi ho, it takes around a year for these rate increases to be approved. So this was pre-train, no? Yung pagtaas ng kuryente. Second, international oil prices. As you know, our imports have skyrocketed compared to May 2017, when it was around $50 a barrel. By June, it was around $75 a barrel or even more. Although ngayon, pababa na kasi the OPEC countries have actually committed to expanding production. So our oil imports will be going down over time kung mangyari po ito, at sana mangyari talaga ito. In addition, nagmahal lalo ang ating oil imports dahil po sa depreciation ng peso laban sa dolyar. So mas mahal talaga yung pag-angkat. Of course, on the flip side, we know that remittances are favored by a depreciated peso, and our exporters also benefit from a depreciated peso. But still, people are hurting because of these prices, these increased prices. Fish was a big driver of inflation. We had supply issues in terms of fish, dahil po sa fish kill, dahil po sa red tide scare, at dahil sa weather-related issues. And lastly, agriculture was affected by supply-side issues. Tight yung supply. Gusto ko lang po i-highlight yung rice dahil may mungkahi po ang ating economic team to tarify rice. no? Dahil yan po ay matagal na natin dapat ginawa. I'll talk about that in just a bit. But alam po natin na na-delay po yung imports ng NFA, kaya ho, it took a while for the NFA rice to be distributed. Actually, there was no shortage in rice. That was not true. There was a lower buffer stock in NFA rice, but actually the commercial quantities were enough. Kaso nung in-announce po ng NFA na 2 araw na lang yung buffer stock nila, narinig ho ng merkado, nagtaasan bigla lahat ng presyo. So we were still feeling those effects in June, but now 250,000 metric tons arrived a few weeks ago. They're being distributed. Tapos meron pa pong parating na around 800,000 metric tons. Okay, so this was June to year-on-year inflation. Ito naman po yung June month-on-month, no, May to June. The biggest drivers of inflation, if you look at PSA's numbers, were 2 things. One, education expenses, kasi pasukan po ang June, which means tuition increases in the private schools were felt.
School supplies too.
And school supplies, and that happens every year. So cyclical po yan. Pangalawa, medyo cyclical din, depende sa storms natin, pero vegetables were in short supply in June because of the start of the typhoon season. Marami pong naanod. So these are the main drivers of the month-on-month. These are some of the main drivers of the year-on-year. Ang hindi ko po nalagay dito, I think it's one of the top 10 drivers of year-on-year inflation. And this is interesting to note, is catering, which includes restaurants and catering for parties. So actually,
Really?
we're really looking at also a demand side pressure on inflation. Kasi mas marami ho talagang kumakain sa labas siguro at saka nagpapaparty. June especially kasi maraming kasal. So one of the main drivers of inflation year on year was catering and restaurants.
Really?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Pero ito po mahalaga, yung rice tarification. This is the most important reform in terms of poverty reduction that we can pass. The key provisions are to shift from our system of quotas. Matagal na ho nating utang yan sa ating international trade commitments, no? Into tariffs to allow freer importation of rice. Anyone can import rice as long as they're willing to pay the import tariff. Instead of now, NFA controls the licenses, the import licenses, and that really increases the price of rice in our markets. So we will use the tariff revenue to improve the productivity and the livelihoods of our farmers.
Will it not kill production, rice production and the farmers? Because I've heard of farmers who have opted to import rather than produce.
Is that right?
Yes.
Well, what we know is that Thailand and Vietnam produce at half the price that we do. But there are some regions in the Philippines that are competitive. Let's say the Nueva Ecija area, no? Very competitive yan. So kaya po nila. What we need to do is make sure that the tariff is really earmarked for the farmers so that they can shift to higher value crops, vegetables, fruits, cocoa, cacao or coffee. Yan, para ho mas talagang gumanda ang hanap buhay ng ating mga magsasaka. But also, that would depend on the climate of the area where the farms are. Kailangan ho pag-aralan ng mabuti. In the meantime, we need to support the farmers with the tariff.
Very good. Some legislators are opting to plant marijuana na raw eh.
Hindi ko po
Legalize marijuana, di ba?
Hindi ko po narinig yun.
Okay.
But anyway, what will be the impact of tarifying rice? The impact will be inflation will actually fall by 0.4, actually to 0.6 percentage points if we do it by the third quarter of this year. Yan po ang estimate ng Bangko Sentral. So that will really bring inflation down. Second, the price of rice in our markets will fall from between 4 to 7 pesos per kilo. And that is good for all consumers of rice. Most Filipino families are consumers of rice.
Very good.
Opo. So, in summary, ano po yung makikita natin without train? Kasi yan po yung mungkahin ng iba. No? Inflation in June would have been 4.8% instead of 5.2%, which is lower but not much lower, and we would lose 99% of income taxpayers having more money in their pockets. a total of 12 billion pesos that the government does not collect anymore. We will lose close to 90 billion pesos in tax revenues. Tinanong po ninyo kanina, how will we pay for our infrastructure build-up? Well, 30% or 27 billion of the 90 billion is earmarked for social services, health and education. Napag-usapan ko po kanina, we have to pay for our public education system. Marami ho tayong enrollees this year. At 63 billion pesos in infrastructure from the incremental revenues from train. And then we would lose 93,195 jobs in infrastructure. No, just this year, kung wala pong train. So, again, those who say suspend train, ang mungkahi po namin ay tingnan po natin ang mga datos. Let's look at the evidence because we lose a lot. No? 2 to 4 we will lose without train. And this is what we will gain, number one. We would still have an inflation. We would have still had an inflation rate of around 4.8%. And by the way, it's important to note that inflation has always been a concern of the public. I'll just explain this graph quickly. Itong blue line, ito po yung inflation rate through the quarters. Ito pong orange bar, ibig sabihin po niyan, it was the inflation and prices were the number one concern of the public during that time. So actually, prices were a concern even when inflation was 0.6%. Which means we need more structural solutions. We need to tarify rice, for instance. That's one of the things that would really help us. But regardless of where inflation is coming from and where higher prices are coming from, and we're not off the hook actually. We're still looking at a pretty high inflation rate until the third quarter of this year. And the experts have said that the number will start tapering off in the fourth quarter of this year and bring us within target by next year. So actually, there's a bit of pain that we will still be experiencing, and that's why we need to help those who need help and who are hurting from higher prices. And that's why in train, there was design of unconditional cash transfers for 10 million recipients. 7 million of the poorest Filipino households are receiving 2,400
Have they
a
begun
year.
receiving in the first place?
Nasa kwan po tayo, 4.2 million recipients already at this point. And then we have to accelerate for the remaining 5.8.
Okay. And then the fuel vouchers?
The fuel vouchers, Department of Transportation and the Land Bank have started disbursing fuel vouchers, pero they've tested the system and it's been operational for around 2 or 3 weeks now. But the mega payouts that will be done simultaneously in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao will happen this month. So ang kailangan po natin talaga ay magpatulong po sa media to communicate that those who hold legitimate franchises among the PUJs really come and get their pantawid pasada. Kasi po, baka ho hindi ho mapuntahan, hindi ho makuha.
Hindi makarating.
Well, available naman po siya talaga.
What I mean is, baka iba yung mapagbigyan.
Hindi naman ho. Baka ho hindi lang ma-collect. So what we need to do is to make sure to communicate it broadly so that those who hold legitimate franchises will really come and get their pantawid pasada. This year, it's 5,000 pesos per PUJ na may legitimate franchise.
Yung pong 5,000 is good for how long?
That's for the second half of 2018 already, 6 months.
Okay.
It covers around, the minimum is around 40 to 50% of the excise on diesel.
Okay.
But actually, that's based on a pretty low, a very conservative estimate. Kasi po yung estimate po niyan ay 1 litro ng diesel nasa 2.6 kilometers lang ang takbo. But actually, I think it's more than that for most cases. So yan ho ang social mitigating measures. This year, talagang nagsikap po ang DSWD at ang Land Bank dito po sa UCTs, Unconditional Cash Transfers. Kwan po yan, 7 million of the poorest households and 3 million social pensioners.
Okay.
Yung mga senior citizens po natin na walang GSIS tsaka SSS. Tapos ito pong fuel vouchers is for 179,000 more or less PUJs na may legitimate franchise. Kwan ho, dahil hindi pa po na-implement fully itong national ID system natin. Talagang nag-over-the-counter po sila at saka yung mga may mga card na. So they had to do a combination.
Yes.
But once our national ID system has been rolled out to a more mature level, pwede na po natin i-link yung disbursements nitong mga social mitigating measures dun sa national ID system.
Okay, do you have any schedule as to when the jeepney drivers would benefit from this vouchers?
Well, the pilot payouts have been done. So meron na hong nakatanggap, but the mega payouts will be done simultaneously in island groups na Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao
Okay.
this month po, ngayong
This
August.
month.
Opo.
And then susunod niyan will be May of 2019?
The disbursement schedule for 2019, I'll need to get back to you
Yeah,
on that.
because that's election month eh.
I see.
Diba? So baka may connection sa politika. I'm not saying it has connections, but you know, pag dumating yan ng Mayo, magandang bagay yun. Diba?
Well, nakabase naman po siya sa listahan ng LTFRB. So
Yeah.
it's not based on any other
Yeah,
list.
precisely.
Papa.
Precisely.
So again, we need to help those who are feeling the pain of the higher price. No? And DTI is doing a great job of monitoring what we call BNPC, mga basic necessities and prime commodities. These are the products that poor households buy on a regular basis.
But Asek, you will agree with me that the good Secretary of Trade has focused his attention on supermarkets. Most people don't go to supermarkets. They still go to the wet markets.
Which is why ito pong DTI program for monitoring prices is really for supermarkets and groceries. And now, meron po silang meron po silang program for large sari-sari stores to make sure that they're selling within SRP. Pero ang Department of Agriculture, through a conversation with Secmon Lopez, they've started rolling out their SRP system for agricultural products.
Yeah.
Yan po yung nasa wet market.
Very good. Maganda yan.
Opo.
Namimiss ko kasi si
Opo.
si Emo, Ernie Ordonez at si Cito Lorenzo. We really went to the market to check.
So they've started rolling out for some key products. Ang mahalaga po dito sa monitoring natin ng mga presyo, and people will say kasi that they're feeling the price increases. How can DTI say that the stores are selling products in line with SRPs? That's because what are being monitored are the products that low-income families buy on a regular basis. Ang kasama po dyan, sardinas, instant noodle, cooking oil, sugar, flour, mga ganyan. Hindi naman monitored lahat ng produkto dahil that would cost a lot, no, to monitor everything. What we need to do is make sure that we are monitoring the products that low-income families buy on a regular basis.
Okay.
Ngayon, if I may, just a few slides on Train Package 2. Because ito po yung sinabi ni Presidente during the SONA that should be focused on in Congress. And what we really hope to achieve through Package 2 is a level playing field for businesses in the Philippines. Ano po ba yung mga problema natin sa corporate taxation, yung mga negosyo po natin? Una, we have the highest corporate income tax rate in ASEAN. It's 30% compared to the regional average of around 22.5%. Alam naman po natin ang Singapore ang pinakamababa, 17% po sila. And ang isa pa pong issue natin ay marami ho tayong investment promotion agencies. We have 14 and they are all authorized by law to grant incentives. No, so ang nangyayari po, a vast majority of business, mostly small and medium enterprises, are paying the 30% rate, while those who have the resources to hire the best tax lawyers and the best accountants are able to look for the best deal from among the 14 investment promotion agencies and receive incentives that effectively make their tax rate 6 to 13%. That's versus the 30% that most small and medium enterprises pay. It's important to note that many of the investors who do receive incentives have made very big contributions to equitable growth and inclusive growth in the Philippines. But some of them have received their incentives for forever. Sa Pilipinas lang po ang may forever pagdating sa incentives.
Really?
Opo. Kasi ang maximum po ng ibang mga karatig bansa natin, sabihin natin Indonesia or Brunei, nasa 20 years lang po sila. Tayo lang po ang may forever pagdating sa incentives. And that's not the right way to have an incentives regime because we need to be flexible give incentives for a reasonable amount of time, but to be flexible and be able to offer those incentives to those who will bring our economy into the industries of the future.
Okay.
So, in addition to the 14 IPAs, kasama po dyan ng PEZA, BOI, SEZA, ZSEZA, etc. We also have 315 laws, 123 of which that grant investment incentives, 192 that grant non-investment incentives. So talagang napaka-komplikado po ng ating incentives regime at kailangan po siyang isimplify at gawing mas patas. Ito po yung sinabi ko, tax incentives are forever and in lieu of all taxes, both local and national. So, hindi ho maganda yan for the idea that we would really like to support countryside development because local governments are not allowed to, if a company is receiving an incentive package, local
Okay.
governments are not allowed to decide for themselves what kind of tax regime they would like in their own locality.
Okay.
So, yun ho. We should give incentives. We should give them for the right reasons. Those investors who want to create jobs, good jobs for the Filipino workers, investors that would like to invest in the countryside, and investors who will bring research and technology
Okay.
to the country. So yan po ang magagandang rason para magbigay ng insentibo, and we should continue to give incentives
You
for
know,
those
Asek,
reasons.
the best thing you can do is find out from BOI how many manifested interest in opening businesses in the Philippines and how many of them really pursued that plan.
That's important.
Oo.
Yes, because through TIMTA, alam po ninyo, TIMTA was a law that was passed during the previous administration, but it's sort of the bedrock on the foundation of understanding our incentives regime. In 2015, we gave 301 billion pesos worth of incentives to investors. A large majority of these incentives were given by PEZA.
Okay.
301 billion pesos in 2015 alone. So, ito po yung comparative tax rates. Nasabi ko na nga po, tayo yung pinakamataas. Tayo lang po ang my forever because after a 4-year plus 8-year extension of income tax holidays, we give gross income earned at 5% forever. That's still effectively 6 to 13%. Of net taxable income, which is very unfair if it's forever kasi nga, ang mga small and medium enterprises natin, 30% ang binabayaran. So, ito po yung magulong incentive system na nasabi ko kanina. Ito po yung nabanggit ko. We, in 2015, gave 301 billion pesos worth of incentives. And these are the rates that I mentioned. Without special incentives, a company has to pay 30%. With incentives, nasa 6.3 to 13.5% lamang ang binabayaran nila. So what do we want to do? We want to give incentives to companies that will bring Philippine industries and the Philippine economy into the future, but in an equitable way. So the performance that we're looking for is job creation, stronger exports, countryside development, research and development. We want to make sure that these incentives are targeted to strategic industries. Meron po yan kasama sa panukalang batas ng Train 2. We want to make sure that the incentives are time-bound and not forever because, again, every peso that we give in incentives is a peso that we do not collect in revenue and are unable to spend in infrastructure, health, and education. And lastly, we want these incentives to be transparent. Kasi dati, before TIMTA, we did not know at DOF what incentives had been given. The only agencies that knew were the investment promotion agencies.
Yeah. Okay.
So, lower the corporate income tax rate to around 25% from 30%. Kung kayang mas mababa, babaan pa po natin. Improve the governance of incentives. So, we are able to give incentives for good reasons. And only investments that satisfy the four principles that I mentioned
Okay.
receive them. Yun
Alright.
po.
Napakaganda.
Salamat po.
Ilaw po. Ilaw po. Pakiilawan nga po para makita ko. Hi, Pat. Magandang araw. Dumating na si Pat. Alright. Short
May
reaction.
I share?
Sige.
Yung
Please.
kasi sinasabi ni ASEC na yung incentives in most companies, tuloy-tuloy. I know that BOI only gives 5 to 7 years for new companies, new technologies coming into the country. What's needed here is to be able to quantify how many are those corporations that are still enjoying that benefit, no? Yung
Okay.
tuloy-tuloy. Kasi it's important that it has to be maintained because that's the only way we can attract foreign investors to come into the country. Yung 5%, 7% tax holiday, withholding tax holiday importations, di ba? Kailangan yun for investments in equipments
Mhm.
and materials. Okay.
May incentives dapat talaga yun, no?
Dapat
Right?
talaga ibigay yun.
Okay.
That's one way of attracting foreign investors.
Pero
5 years lang naman eh.
Pero you've been there for some time eh. Pero bakit iba-iba yung mga programa nito mga ahensyang to?
Kaya nga hindi. Kaya nga kailangan nga ma-quantify ng finance para malaman talaga sino ba yung nag-i-enjoy ng benefit niya yan na tuloy-tuloy.
Yeah.
Diba? Kailangan ma-address yan eh.
Okay, very good. Dr. Cal, kayo po PhD in transport, pero hindi ko malaman bakit yung mga bulok sa Japan at sa Korea nakakarating sa Pilipinas at nabebenta mula sa Clark at mula sa Cagayan.
Oo nga. But of course, under this administration, I hope this will change, diba, through the public transport modernization program.
Uh-huh. You're optimistic something good will happen, eh?
I wish it would, kaya lang medyo konting problema nakikita ko.
Ano po yun?
With respect,
Yung konti, sige.
with respect to social program. Yung modernization program, palagay ko kulang ng compensation to those operators and drivers who would be affected by the upgrading.
Uh-huh.
Ang program na ngayon, kung ikaw ang operator, you would be given something like 80,000 as part of your equity for the upgrading.
Okay.
There is no really compensation for the loss of job. Dapat if you decide not to operate your vehicle anymore, and that would be your option, I think there's a justification for compensation. Even the Constitution provides compensation for those affected by programs such as this one. Unfortunately, this is not part of the current program. The good Assistant Secretary mentioned about social program. Dapat talaga
Isama yun.
Isama yun.
Okay. Ang maganda kasi rito, ASEC, maganda yung binanggit nyo na may monitoring. Kami ni na Jackie, I was a beat reporter for some time. Kasama sa beat ko noon sa Radyo Veritas yung price monitoring. Pag nagtanong ako sa palengke, ito yung presyo. And then people would say, ito yung report ng DTI, ito yung presyo sa palengke. Sabi ng tao, di bumili ka sa radyo. It's really ticklish. It's very political when we have good programs like that. Pero pagdating sa baba, hindi nasusunod dahil maraming factors. Like for example, yung bigas mo galing sa Nueva Ecija, ilan checkpoint yung dinadaanan nun? Ilan nangungutong dun? Yung isda galing sa Sorsogon, ilan yung checkpoint na dinadaanan? Things like this are added to production, and the poor businessman would not, sabihin natin, deduct the expenses dun sa presyo nilang hinihiling sa palengke. Hindi po ba na-check din ng DOF yun?
Ang may mandato po, again, DTI checks the prices in groceries and supermarkets. Ang nahanap naman po kasi nila is that for the products that they monitor, again, the basic goods that yung binibili po ng pangkaraniwang Pilipino at ang pangkaraniwang pamilya ay within SRPs naman. Pag may nakikita po silang violations, there were a few, pero konti lang daw eh. Pag nasulatan po ng letter of inquiry, binababa naman po yung presyo to within SRP. the DA system for agricultural products is quite new. So I think they're still beefing up their capacity in order to do this in a more robust way.
Asek, this may be ticklish, but smuggling has gone unabated because according to reports, may sinigawan nga si Presidente na nasa kartel ng bigas. At ang sabi, pag hindi mo ika binabayan, may kalalagyan ka. At yun din yung warning ni Presidente ng SONA. Hindi kaya mas mabuti kung kasuhan na itong mga kolokoy na to. Sa halip na warning, paano bang ibig sabihin sige, negosyo lang kayo, wag lang kayo pahuhuli. Hindi po ba ganun yun?
The most sustainable and long-term solution pagdating po sa bigas ay tarification. Dahil po it will lower the incentive for smuggling. Because anyone can import insofar as they're willing to pay the import tariff. At yan po ay magiging mas simple, mas transparent yung pag-angkat ng bigas. And again, there will be a lot more players in that space.
Okay. Balikan po. Yes. Sige, short reaction.
So, kailangan mababa lang yung tariff na yun, Assistant Secretary, because if you add it up to the price of rice, tumataas eh. Sinasabi nila, yung mga economists, rice should not be taxed para ma-maintain yung price. And one thing more, Melo, yung SRP, that's a good discussion for
We will
your
talk
Tapatan.
about it.
You know
Yeah,
why?
yeah.
You know why? I've watched mga inspectors sa television, no, pag bumaba sa palengke. You know, they allow 10% increase doon sa SRP. So, yun ang palusot ng mga tindera.
Okay. Kukunin natin si Vic Di Magiba dyan.
Okay.
Oh, that is, yes, please.
Just on the tariff, no, I agree it has to be calibrated on many fronts. We have to make sure that the import tariff does several things at the same time. Una, it allows us to collect enough revenue to support our farmers. That's one of the most important goals of the tariff. Second, kailangan nakakalibrate po siya para mas mababa pa rin ang presyo ng bigas sa merkado. We need to achieve both goals at the same time. At napag-aralan na po yan, lalo na po ng PIDS. No? Yung,
PIDS.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Philippine Institute for Development Studies.
Let me share with you the real problem sa rice, bakit nagkaganyan-ganyan. Ang ginawa kasi ng gobyerno, through
Which
cooperatives, national government, NFA,
Under
ang
whose term?
importation, hanggang ngayon.
Hanggang ngayon.
Because they allow importations through cooperatives. The problem is, these farmers do not have the money. So what happens is, binebenta rin kay Chualay,
Yung kanilang papel.
yung funding. Sila rin. So,
Sila
mahal
rin
din.
yun.
Mahal din.
Okay, yes.
The presentation confirms my position that the Philippine government would have the financial resources to implement the Build program. Kaya lang, the problem lies not in the financial capacity to implement, but in the absorptive capacity of our agencies mandated to implement the program.
Why did you say so?
Hindi, kasi tingnan mo na, di ba, we know that DPWH, one of the biggest siguro infrastructure agency to implement the Build program, even underspent, di ba? So, and this is related and is borne out by forecast that we would have a shortage of technical people, not only in government who would implement the program, but also doon sa private sector. You will find that pati mga contractors, kulang na rin ng capability. So, doon dapat mag-focus rin. Kasi even if we have the money to implement, pag wala kang sufficient absorptive capacity to implement the program, derail yung intention natin.
Okay.
I'm happy to share that there's been a 41.6% increase in the disbursement of DPWH this year, totaling to around 104 billion incremental spending compared to last year. So last year, compared to this year, we're doing a lot better in spending in infrastructure.
You have a coordination with NEDA's ICC, right? Meron po ba kayo nakita ng mga potential white elephants dun sa nakalistang build projects?
mas alam po ni Sir yun. Although my understanding is they're really looking at ano po bang benepisyo nitong mga proyektong ito for the Filipino people, because that is what will really bring inclusive development to
Okay.
different parts of the country. So, pero hindi po ako expert in the area that you mentioned. So,
Okay.
si Doctor po.
Doc,
The-
maganda to, maganda to.
this administration just came out with a national transport policy, no, approved by the NEDA board only in June this year. I noticed that part of the policy parang modifies the method of evaluating projects. Parang hindi na like the previous strict implementation of a feasibility study. Parang na-reduce yung ganyang evaluation. And the result of this would have projects na may not be economically viable but implemented for other reasons such as political reason.
Sige
So,
nga po. Would you care to cite some na pinagdududahan ninyo?
ang isang example na not far really is yung rail project for cargo between Subic and Clark. You now have a good expressway. Pwede man yung cargo to be transported by road. I do not see the viability of investing on a rail solely for cargo between Subic and Clark. Yan, to me, in terms of feasibility, is questionable. And there are other projects such as bridges, kailangan din i-review, especially connecting islands, ano. Kasi yung the use of money, dapat there are many candidates for better use of money. Pipiliin natin through good feasibility study,
What bridges are these?
such as proposal to connect even Cebu to Bohol, yung mga ganyan, napakalayo. Then Iloilo to Guimaras, Bacolod to Guimaras. These are example of projects na dapat talaga i-review.
What about the Davao-Digos Tagum Rail?
Now that you mention it, that's another project that needs review because sa tingin ko lang by looking at the pattern dyan sa Davao, that's really an alignment that would not provide you with good benefit, no, in terms of ridership. Tataka nga ako na bakit with so many potential alignments, yun pa yung
Napili.
napili.
Okay.
Pero if I may add, Melo, alam mo yung running a railway system doesn't give profits eh. Talagang services yan. It's just a must. It's a must that produce or harvest in the countryside should be able to reach the city. Kaya
Pakilapit lang po
importante
ng
'yon.
konti, yeah.
Kaya importante 'yon. I'll share it with you. There are so many projects with a lot of funding, ready name funding, but the problem of DPWH are the companies or the people that will prepare the study. Problem nila 'yun.
Yeah. Nung araw pa yung DOTC, isang kwarto yung mga plano at mga feasibility studies. Wala naman nangyari. Pero ano pong tingin ninyo rito? Kung viability ang in question, wouldn't we have white elephants?
I'm not an expert in the particular areas of engineering and areas that good Dr. Cal knows a lot more about than I do. But my understanding is that the economic team is very particular about the social benefits of the programs overall. We really need to make sure that the people will benefit from the infrastructure build-up. No? That's the number one. That's the number one priority. And at the same time, if we look at the evaluation of the ratings agencies, no, the international ratings agencies, they are very much optimistic. No, they are very optimistic about the infrastructure buildup of the country. In addition, there was an IMF study group, an IMF mission that was just here in the Philippines, the Article 4 mission, and they gave a ringing endorsement as well, no, from an international perspective of the reform program in terms of our fiscal space, in tax reform program, as well as the infrastructure and human development investment programs of the government.
Okay. We'd like to open the floor to our colleagues from the media who may have questions. Ready na po ang ating mikropono. Please identify yourself and the entity you come from. Let's start. Yes, please.
I'm Kathy from UNTV. Our question is, ano na po yung mga nakumpletong infrastructure projects ng Duterte administration at ano na po yung mga naiambag nito? Tapos yung ikalawa po namin tanong, meron po bang debt trap sa China? Yung debt trap po ba sa China ay posible po ba sa inyong mga pananaw? Salamat po.
Ang report po ng DPWH is that they have completed 3,945 kilometers of road, 842 bridges. The DOTR has also rehabilitated 8 airports, night-rated 5 airports, and completed 129 commercial port projects. Ang New Clark City po natin, kasama po yan sa mga flagship, the phase 1 was 20% completed in 6 months. Alam po natin kasama dyan yung mga sports facilities that will be used for our hosting of the SEA Games. So, pagdating naman po sa China ay pinag-aaralan po yan ng maigi. Hindi po yan magiging debt trap dahil talagang maingat naman po ang ating economic managers sa mga terms and conditions ng ating ODA. Hindi ho nila papayagan mangyari yan tulad ng nangyari dun sa ibang mga bansa. At saka, yung 2% to 3% interest rate is still a lot lower than the commercial rates, no, and rates from the private markets. So it's still a concessional lending. We will still benefit from that as a country.
Magkano po ba talaga utang natin at this time? Yung ating indebtedness to multilaterals. Would you have some figures? Okay, sayang.
Debt to GDP ratio natin is at around 42. I'm sorry, 0.4. 0.42. Bababa po yan ng mga 0.38 over the next few years. Again, no, the IMF mission said that we are in a very good position in terms of our debt to GDP ratio.
But how will the current peso-dollar exchange rate impact on our loans?
Well, may impact naman talaga ang exchange rate. Pero again, I'm not an expert in that area, so I'll need to get back to you.
Sayang, baka dumating kasi yung panahon na kikiluhin natin yung piso pambayad ron sa foreign debt. Sa Venezuela lang. Okay, more questions? Jackie, I know you have concerns, please. O exclusive muna. Sige na, tanong ka na para dire-diretso tayo. Pero samantalang naghihintay tayo ng tanong ng mga colleagues natin sa media, nabanggit yung debt trap. I had an interview with Secretary Dominguez. Sabi niya, wala namang debt trap dahil lahat ng mga projects pinag-aralan at merong viability. Pero katulad nito, do we build projects to serve and not to earn? Dahil lang walang problema yung sabi ni Choi, na talagang layunin ng katulad ng railway para makapaglingkod. Pero it has to be viable para ma-maintain. Dahil baka yan ay katulad rin ng MRT3 na every so often namamatay.
Which is why I think talagang mahalaga yung operations and maintenance, no? Yung O&M side. At yan po ay open to PPP. Nasabi na po yan ng ating mga economic managers since they started in the Duterte administration, that again, the economic viability of these projects are crucially important, and that there are multiple modalities open in order to operate and maintain these projects, including government run or public-private partnership in O&M.
Yes. Dr. Cal?
Dapat i-clarify yung sinasabing rail need not be economically viable kasi hindi naman really in theory hindi totoo. It justified yung urban rail for subsidy. Okay? Why? Because the urban rail yields external benefits. I tell you an example. MRT3 above EDSA. Okay? Yung operation of the MRT3 benefits even those who do not use them, such as those who continue to travel along EDSA by bus or by car. Why? Because of the transfer of demand from the road to the rail, less congested na yung EDSA. So those who continue to use EDSA would be benefited. Ito yung tinatawag together as external benefits, which would justify the fare structure for MRT3 to be less than what it would be to recover the full cost. Social benefit. So in theory, hindi really true to say that rail transit hindi kailangang economically viable. It is because of the existence of external benefits.
Yes.
Pero Secretary, yung kasing dinidiscuss nyo, yung inside the city, in a thickly populated.
Outside, it has to be, the more that it has to be viable, kasi less na yung external benefits. Hindi, with less finance, hindi tama na you would say, oh, we will just implement these projects for social reasons. The social reasons should be computed.
May load factor studies, right? Ang LTFRB, bago magbigay ng linya sa mga bus, tatanungin muna, ilan bang porsyento ng upuan mo sa bus ang nauupuan sa kada biyahe? So, ganun din yung trend, no?
Hindi, tsaka meron naman solusyon yun eh. Melo. Yung commercialization ng terminal.
Naku, eto na naman tayo.
Ibig sabihin, no, what I'm saying is putting up a mall,
Yes, precisely.
putting up housing near the terminal. As a matter of fact, I saw the plan in Mindanao. Andun na rin yung terminal ng mga buses eh.
Okay.
Pagbaba nila, buses na kagad. So they'll be brought to their final destination.
Ano kaya pagkakaiba nung trend natin sa trend sa Italia at sa Alemanya at sa iba pang bansa sa Europa? Dahil ang makikita mo, may trend ka nga, may istasyon. Pero pag sinabi ng trend, darating ka ng ganitong oras, aalis ng ganitong oras na susunod. Sa Pilipinas, hindi nangyayari yan eh. Yung, matanda na ako eh, nung araw yung MRR, yung Manila Railroad, ang tawag nila medyo raot-raot. Laging PNR, pirminang raot, lagi ng sira. No? So, sabi nga, for the museum na yung mga trend natin. I don't know. But then, yes, please.
Yung mga train projects po natin under Build will be very modern trains. Hindi po yung tulad nung nasa isip natin na yung mga makaluma. Ito po puro modern trains. At yung isa pa pong train na gusto kong pag-usapan, yung tax reform for acceleration and inclusion. Train din po yun. At sana po mapasa na yan on time.
Okay, titingnan natin. Yes, please.
Asek Lambino, this is for you. Well, President Duterte gave you a tall order on this train too, but there are hesitations from the lawmakers. There's this no one wants to sponsor it from the Senate. How are you addressing these concerns para maipasa itong train too? I guess there were hesitations because there was change in leadership, House leadership, and also medyo na-traumatize sila dun sa train 1 because of the inflationary effect.
Again, because it's a tax measure, it really has to start in the House before it goes to the Senate. So the House has to pass it first. And what matters is that the Committee on Ways and Means, chaired by Dax Kua, has done a lot of work already in terms of vetting the different versions of the bill and in conducting a few hearings. That's already happened. Sa Senado naman, actually, there are parts of Train 2 that have been virtually filed. For instance, Senator Drilon filed a fiscal incentives rationalization bill back in 2016. So there are bits and pieces of it that are and the main parts, some of them are already in the legislative process. Ngayon, kailangan ho siguro ay paigtingin pa namin yung aming pag-explain, advocating for the measure, and we have, of course, made ourselves available to all legislators who are interested to explain further and to provide technical assistance para bumilis po yung proseso. Also, last year, if you remember, for Train 1, around this time, sinasabi rin nila na mukhang mahirap ipasa. So we're hopeful for Train 2 kasi ito rin naman yung nadaanan natin last year, and yet President Duterte was able to sign Train 1 into law in December 2017.
Sir, how are you going to explain to the lawmakers that we need Train 2 in, in a brief manner? And hindi magiging repeat siya ng Train 1?
It's a different part of the tax system that we are reforming, Jackie. So in Train 1, it was, the excise on oil, sweetened beverages, and tobacco. No, yun yung main elements nung revenue generating components. Tapos binaba natin yung personal income tax for 99% of taxpayers. Yun yung ni-reform natin for Train 1. For Train 2, what we are reforming is the corporate tax system, and it's designed to be revenue neutral. It's not revenue generating. We just want to correct a very unfair corporate tax system where small and medium enterprises have to pay 30%, the highest tax rate in ASEAN, and those who do receive incentives are paying at 6 to 13%, in comparison. That being said, Train 2 is still very pro-incentives for the right reasons. If we have investors who are interested in the country because they would like to contribute to national development, at the same time do very well, based on their own calculations, then they should certainly receive incentives for the investments that they will be making, for the performance that they will be able to do here in the Philippines in a targeted way for strategic industries, in a transparent way. We should know what incentives we are giving, and in a time-bound way. Hindi pwedeng forever. Yun yung apat na criteria. But certainly, we should be giving incentives for the right reasons. And I think that's a miscommunication, a misunderstanding among many of those who oppose. Kala nila, ika-cancel yung mga incentives. When actually, we are just improving the incentive system, making sure that they will benefit both the investor and the Filipino people.
So no prices will go up, right?
Um,
Parang with the Train 2. So just to help explain to the consumers, no prices will go up with Train 2.
most of those who receive incentives are exporters. So actually, minimal lang yung sales nila in the Philippines. So yeah, essentially, it's really a revenue neutral tax measure. It really just corrects the unfair system that we have. In fact, what we hope is that by lowering the corporate income tax rate for small and medium enterprises in particular, they will have more money to invest in improving their productivity and in hiring more workers. So yun talaga yung gusto nating mangyari pagdating sa pagbaba ng corporate income tax rate.
If I may add, importante talaga mabigyan ng more incentives yung SMEs. Do you know that SMEs are more than 90%? 99. Oh, yun. Na business, maliliit lang yung
Okay.
big corporations. Kaya since that's the thrust of the government to assist SMEs, kailangan talaga ma-approve yun.
Hindi, pero binanggit mo yan. It's a can of worms because there is this agri-agra law, but there are banks na magbabayad na lang ng multa kaysa magpautang sa magsasaka at maliliit na mangingisda. How does that sit with you?
The Train 2 is very different from that because it will lower the corporate income tax rate for everybody. It's not fine-based measure.
Yeah,
It will
precisely.
it
Yeah,
will
pero
make it
binanggit niya
better
kasi
for a large
SMEs eh.
majority.
Wala rin namang kapital eh.
Yung agri-agra law, yung mga bangko, yung mga corporations, nakakatulong pa rin sa agriculture yun because what happens is their compliance is via bonds, long-term bonds. So these are being used by Land Bank of the Philippines to extend loans to farmers.
Yun nga ang problema sa land bank eh. Ang kliyente ng land bank, yung malalaking korporasyon, hindi magsasaka eh.
No, 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 no.
Yung
Ah,
rural banks, nakakatulong.
Land Bank subsidizes the interest rate being given to farmers from commercial operations.
Okay, sige. Let's leave it at that. We'll have another session for that. Jackie, follow up.
Sorry, one more question. Oil prices are expected to go up tomorrow. Really big hike. There are calls to suspend this excise tax on Train 1. How will you convince them to still continue this part of Train 1?
Well, there is a mechanism in Train 1 for the suspension of the next oil excise increase. If the average price of our oil imports of Dubai crude hits $80 per barrel for an average of 3 months before the next increase in excise, then the next increase is suspended. So talagang meron namang mekanismo. If that happens na umabot sa ganon yung presyo ng international crude, then the suspension mechanism will kick in. That being said, if we look, I understand that the pain is felt on a day-to-day basis, no? And we really need to keep doing our social mitigating measures and accelerating the rollout para mas lalong makatulong, lalo na given what you just said, yung pantawid pasada natin. No? So again, we will be doing a more intense communication effort so that talagang makuha yung pantawid pasada ng mga operators for their drivers. But at the same time, if we look at the medium term or over the next few months, even short term in that sense, no, next few months, the production capacity of OPEC will be increasing. Not just the capacity, sorry, their actual production. So we're really looking at over the next year a reduction in oil prices.
Okay. More questions? Yes, please.
Hi, good morning, sir. This is for ASEC Lambino. I'm Gerard de la Peña from TV5. I just want to get the sense of the Department of Finance on this. How do you feel about the change of leadership in the House of Representatives? Do you feel threatened that this will jeopardize efforts to pass the train law, the Train 2?
We will work with the House leadership on Train 2, Train 3, Train 4. It also is the case that the speaker is an economist, no? So I think she speaks the language of tax reform. So I'm very hopeful.
Mm-hmm. And for my second question, you've mentioned that rice prices will be reduced with the rice tariffication program of the government. Could you please expound more on this?
Say again, sorry.
Yung reduction in prices of rice because of rice tariffication. Please expound on that. How is that so?
Well, what we know is that production in Thailand and Indonesia is, Thailand and Vietnam is a lot more efficient, no? Because they have certain comparative advantages, such as access to irrigation, yung mga freshwater sources nila. May malalaki silang mga ilog. Tayo kasi, we are an archipelago. No? And they have the flat lands that are needed for rice production. So in effect, the price of rice, both at farm gate and in their markets, is around half of the price here in the Philippines. So if we open up the importation of rice and anyone can import, then they can take advantage of the lower prices internationally, bring in rice, pay the import tariff, and still make money. At the same time, the price of rice will go down because we will benefit more from lower prices in the international market, and inflation will also go down. Kasi it will be a year-on-year comparison between the price of rice hopefully in the near future versus the year before that. Diba? So talagang mas mababa na ang presyo ng rice. And rice is around 20% of the consumption of a low-income family. So makakatulong din siya para sa mga mahihirap na pamilya lalo na. Kaya kailangan po talaga natin na paigtingin pa ang ating efforts para mapasa ang rice tarification bill.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay? Yes, please.
Sir, mag-follow up lang po. Yung mga nabanggit nyo pong infra projects under the Build program of the administration, ano na po ba yung mga naiambag po nun when it comes with jobs, opportunities, and other po? Pwede nyo po bang isa-isahin po yun? Kung gaano na po yung naging ambag nun sa atin?
Well, in general, gumagastos tayo ngayon ng mas malaki, higit sa 50 billion pesos a month on infrastructure. For the year, for 2018, the estimate is around 93,195 jobs in the construction sector. For the totality of the Duterte administration from 2017 to 2022, we're looking at 1.7 million jobs in construction and construction-related enterprises. So talagang maraming trabaho ang makikreate dahil sa Build program. Tapos, pagdating naman sa sweldo, if we're spending around 50 billion in infrastructure then per month, then assuming 30% goes to wages, and I think that's a fair assumption to make, that's 15 billion pesos per month in new wages in the construction sector.
Asek, how true is it that there are fears from certain sectors that should a project be financed by, let's say, China, Chinese workers would come and work in the Philippines?
Well, alam mo, galing ako sa Davao a few weeks ago. I was talking to the Davao Constructors Association. Sila po yung mga contractors. Ang sabi nila sa akin, wala na silang mahanap na workers. Kulang na raw. At tumataas na raw ang mga sweldo ng construction workers kasi nga, short supply. So actually, what we need to do is to ask those of our countrymen who are abroad, engineers, construction workers, those who have skills in engineering and construction, to consider coming home. In fact, meron po tayong jobs fair, yung build by jobs fair. I think it's gonna be on August 12. Dun po sa SMX. No? We're expecting thousands of people to come kasi talagang mag-aalok po tayo ng mga trabaho sa construction sector for the Build program.
Okay, thank you.
Sir, pwede po bang sumagot din po yung iba pong guest natin tungkol din sa tanong ko tungkol sa debt trap? Kung sa palagay niyo po, sa views po ninyo, is it possible po ba na
Na
mangyari?
mahulog tayo sa
Apo.
malalim na pagkakautang.
Thank you po.
I don't think so because these projects are intended to perk up the economy. So, kayang-kaya. Lalo ng Pilipinas, of all countries, if you notice, kahit na anong mangyari sa Pilipinas, yung economy natin maganda is because of the presence of the basic fundamentals in business. Ang Pilipinas po, hindi umaasa sa gobyerno. Kami mga businessmen, tayo, hindi umaasa sa suporta ng gobyerno. It's a good thing that the government now is really keen on helping the business sector.
Okay. Yeah.
I also share the same view. No? This would not lead to debt trap.
Yes, please.
Okay,
A good friend who used to be with NEDA.
Yes, before I ask question to Asik Lambino, I'd like to address the question of Mel about the ICC, Investment Coordination Committee. I was a pioneer of the ICC. What projects passed by NEDA? One, the government is the borrower. Two, the government will provide guarantee. Three, the government will provide the equity. Or four, it will impact on the BOP. Now, if it is infrastructure projects, we need feasibility study and detailed engineering. Then the financial IRR should be positive. The economic IRR should be about 12%. Now, my question to Asik Lambino is regarding funding pa rin. Because my understanding is Train 1 was supposed to be passed to fund build. But then there were other intervening projects or laws like the SUC, free college tuition, the increased salaries for uniform workers, the free irrigation, which took the lead ahead of build. Now comes the Bangsamoro Organic Law and the proposed federalism. Again, I think this will even take precedence over build. So where will we get? There will be no funds for Train 2. So where will we get the funding for build beyond federalism, beyond Bangsamoro, Organic Law, etc.
Thank you. Alam mo, pang isang session na yun eh. Pero hindi bale. Sige, sagutin natin.
Train 1 on its own was not designed to pay for all of Build, Build, Build. It was designed to support and create the fiscal space so that, or to help create the fiscal space so that we would be more able to do our infrastructure build up. In fact, 90 billion in incremental revenues for the first year, around 140 billion for the second year, will not cover the whole bill. No, the bill for Build, Build, Build is 8 to 9 trillion between now and 2022. So talagang kailangan ho, combination of factors. We need tax reform that will make the system more equitable and generate resources so that we can be we're more able to improve our infrastructure. We need better tax administration also. Kailangan ho, tumaas din yung collections natin, and so far, the efforts of BOC and BIR have been recognized in that regard. We also need to do borrowing up to 15% of Build, 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 according to NEDA, no, from ODA. We will do 18% of Build, Build, Build through PPPs, and we will do 66% of Build, Build, Build through the budget. So it's train supports the part that will be funded through the budget. Talagang we need multiple sources of revenue and of financing in order to bring our country to the next level.
Yeah, I'm really worried about the budget. I'm not worried about PPP and ODA. Alam ko na yun. I'm not worried about the budget because if this federalism comes into effect, according to Chat Manasan, you will need 55 billion per year. That's before building construction, before hiring bodyguards, purchase of vehicles, etc. Then the Bangsamoro Organic Law, we need about block grants of 5 billion ba yun? 15 billion. So this will eat up into the budget, national budget for the build, build, build. So again, my worry is the budget provision for the build, build, build.
Narinig ko rin po yung sinabi ni Dr. Manasan. I haven't read her study yet, but I think kailangan hong pag-aralan ng mabuti yan dahil on one hand, there are some infrastructure projects that will even assuming we shift, and there I think that is still in process, no, that conversation. There will be projects that only the national government can implement, which is the multi-billion peso projects. So kailangan pong pag-aralan at what level of devolution should infrastructure be done.
Okay. Now, let me ask you, ASEC, has there been any historical account of revenue shortfall over the past several years? May target yung BIR, may target yung customs, at hindi na-attain. How will this impact on our build, considering the fact that you said it's 66% funded by GAA? Number one.
Well, as Secretary Liling Briones said, if we fall short in terms of revenue generation, although BOC and BIR are doing very well so far, then we would have to borrow more. Yun po yung nasabi niya, no? During the press con in Malacanang last week. But we cannot slow down, no, our progress. We really need to keep investing in our infrastructure and our human capital.
Okay. May pahabol ba? Yes, please.
To Mr. Tony Lambino, I'm a social entrepreneur. I'd like to follow up questions regarding rice. Can you look at the experience of the Japanese model when they handled the rice crisis, when the farmers demanded for the parity rights? Na-solve nila yung problema. I think the best model is the Japanese. Kasi kung bibili tayo ng bigas do sa mga farmers sa ibang bansa, and we forget how we nurture the farmers in the country, mukhang hindi balance yun. Siguro bigyan natin ng pansin yun sa pag-aaral nyo, yung Japanese model. Then pangalawa po, yung oil increases, this push the inflation rate. Yun ang culprit talaga. Ngayon, nung panahon ni Marcos, bukod doon sa G2G na po pwede kang bumili sa Russia, o sa importing, although sa producing oil country na mas mura kaysa doon sa international exchange. Di ba? Kasi
okay.
pinasok na nila eh. So
Okay.
baka pwede ho yung tingnan din to for the sake of our country. Thank you very much.
Isang issue, sabi ni Jackie kanina, yung how will the Department of Finance convince lawmakers to pass the measures as suggested by the President. I don't know, I also covered the House for some time. And the basic question of some lawmakers that I know, laging, paano naman si Eddie? Eddie ako. Ano naman pakinabang ko dyan? Dahil magkakaroon ng buwis, madadagdagan din ba yung para sa aming mehoras? You know, how do we deal with such a situation when politicians always think of parochial issues and concerns rather than yung malalaking larawan sa bansa?
Tulad po ng nasabi ni Sir Efren, ni Sir Choi, 99.6% of businesses in the Philippines are micro, small, and medium enterprises. Large majority of those who pay the highest corporate income tax rate in the ASEAN region are small and medium enterprises. Ang micro may special rate naman sila. But there are many small and medium enterprises in every congressional district in the country. And so this will really benefit their own SMEs in their districts. Kaya po napakahalaga po nito. We really need to reform the system and improve the situation of our small business owners.
Okay. Magandang pag-usapan to dahil in some areas in the country, yung congressman may sariling tao sa electric cooperative at meron din dun sa local telephone provider. So dadaan sa poste yun, lahat kopo nila, you know. Kung ganito ang klase ng negosyo, baka hindi tayo umunlad. Di po ba? But anyway, that's politics. Let's not talk about it anymore. Yes.
Last yata ako eh.
Hindi naman. Baka may magtatanong.
Wala na, tinatanong sila. Anyway, Pat Santos po from Tribune. Sir Tony, sa lang yung tanong ko po eh. Tungkol po sa bigas, yung mga rice farmers. Tanggap na po ba natin yung umiiral na sitwasyon na bagsak ang agrikultura ng palay dahil napakamura na, talo na tayo sa neighboring Asia. Then, ano gagawin natin? Hanggang kailan tayo angkat? Para naman mabuhay yung countryside na iniiwan na nila eh. Nag-migrate na sila dito, binibenta sa subdivision o mga developer. Paano po natin ano to? How do we go about yung whole picture ng problem na yung food production po natin locally?
Affected by land conversion.
Lahat.
Yeah.
Factor, yung mga
Okay.
importation,
Okay,
yung
okay.
importation ng rice. Sa
Yes.
can you,
Marami ho tayong pwedeng gawin. First, kailangan ho nating i-identify ano bang areas ang competitive pagdating sa rice production. And there are some major rice growing areas sa Pilipinas na dapat talaga lumaban sa international markets. Opo, meron ho talaga dyan. Yung rice basket natin sa gitnang Luzon, talagang kwan ho yan. Napaka-competitive po nila. Meron pa pong isang klase, kasi galing po ako sa Erie. I worked at Erie for a few years. And there's another special case na kailangan natin suportahan. Yung mga kwanho natin, heirloom rice producers. There are areas in the Cordilleras, Arakan Valley, in Mindanao, etc. that
upland.
Opo, upland po sila pero ang rice po nila ay heirloom rice varieties. Mga pink, purple, black rice. Napaka-attractive sa international markets. Binibili po ng mga $12 per kilo sa Amerika, no? So talagang meron hong laban yung mga traditional farming areas pagdating sa specialty rice. But in terms of yung pagiging competitive, we do have talagang mga irrigated na mga malalaking area sa Central Luzon, for instance. No? So, talagang kailangan ho sila lumaban. Tulungan po natin yung mga specialty rice growing areas. For the others, I think it's really important to support them through parang diversification, crop diversification, or paglipat po sa higher value crops tulad ng vegetables, fruits, Meron din po tayong mga area na bagay sa cacao, may mga area tayo na bagay sa coffee. Yan ho, mas malaki ho ang kita ng farmers dyan. At the same time, for those rice growing areas, to help them become even more competitive, kailangan ho natin silang suportahan with technology. We need to make sure that they have the option to use better seeds. Yung mas malago kasi nasa 4 to 4.5 tons per hectare lang ang natin ang production natin on average. Kailangan iakyat po natin yan according to Dr. Emil Javier, no, na expert talaga sa agriculture, to around 6 tons per hectare. At kailangan din po natin gawin ay mag-mechanize in many ways. Kasi totoo po yung awitin na ang magtanim ay hindi biro. Kasi kung makikita niyo yung traditional farming methods, talagang nakayuko buong hapon. Mahirap po talaga siya. So if we mechanize, we can help our farmers become more productive. In addition, we will need fewer farmers kasi po marami hong farmer na nakausap ko when I was working in the agriculture sector. Ayaw na po nilang maging farmer yung mga anak nila. And the average age of the Filipino farmers around 58. Medyo nandyan na eh. So, kailangan ho talaga ipakita sa kabataan, ma-inspire po sila that farming is profitable, farming is sexy, farming can be done in a very modern way so that we have young people who will come into agriculture.
Yung pag-regulate ng import niya pa, sir, wala ba tayong plano na para mabuhay sila? Yung pasok pag-angkat, medyo stop or unti-unting i-control para ma-dominate ng local farmers yung local market.
Siguro ang gusto po natin ay we produce, tungkol po sa bigas ito, no? That we produce at an efficient level, which means our most efficient farmers should stay in the rice business. Talagang dapat ho ipagpatuloy nila yung kanilang ginagawa. Tulungan ho natin mas maging moderno yung methods, mas maging maganda yung binhi na ginagamit nila para makalaban sila. At the same time, yung mga nag-aangkat, hindi ho pwedeng walang taripa. We need a tariff that will bring the imports to a level na makakalaban pa rin yung mga areas na dapat magtanim pa rin ng bigas. Para maging competitive pa rin sila. At the same time, we take advantage of rice imports para po bumaba ang presyo ng bigas para sa lahat ng Pilipino. Kasi rice is also a consumption issue eh. Ang dami ho nating mag-consume ng bigas sa Pilipinas. In fact, I think the average is 10 kilos a week, no, for a family of 5.
Yeah. Kaya nga galit si Senator Villar eh. Galit sa only rice. Last question.
Magandang umaga po kay Sec Tony Lambino. Si John Carino from Balikatan News. For all we know, this previous administration, meron po tayong napakamalaking big problem regarding smuggled rice from other countries. Now, this present administration, how will be able to solve this problem? Thank you.
Ayun, smuggling.
Ang mahalaga kasi sa rice tarification ay mawawala po yung insentibo para sa smuggling. Kasi magiging bukas po, mas magiging maluwag ang pag-angkat natin ng bigas. So now that there will be many players bringing in rice at a low price, mas maganda ho yung magiging performance. Yung smuggling hindi na magiging ganun ka-profitable kasi nga free importation na tayo for anyone who's willing to pay the tariff. Kaya ho kasi napaka attractive sa smugglers sa ngayon ay dahil nasa quota system po tayo. Ang taas ho ng presyo ng bigas dito sa Pilipinas, kaya sulit para sa kanila, no, na lumabag ng batas. Yun na nga ho pati ho yun, rice tarification will go a long way in solving that problem.
Okay. Brief statements. How do you look at the future, Choi?
Sa akin happy ko because yung build will provide that answer no, especially to farmers to bring their products to the market. Yun ang problema eh. What's happening is kumikita yung mga traders eh. Okay? So, tsaka basic to eh. The Philippines should have that kind of transport facility. Kasi kailangan kumpletuhin muna yan eh para, di ba, na-address natin yung problem ng traffic, pati yung business talaga. So, happy ko doon sa ano, I support Bill.
Okay, isang bagay lang, ano, from what I heard sa automotive industry, sa Thailand, ang pinakamabiling Toyota product ay yung Hilux, hindi yung Innova o Kijang sa Indonesia. Dahilan sa yun ang pinagkakargahan ng mga produkto mula sa mga lalawigan
That's right.
patungo sa lungsod. Dito sa atin, hindi. Tao sinasakay. Isang problema
Correct,
natin.
correct. Kaya may problema tayo sa the reason why we cannot compete in the international market as far as copra is concerned is because of inability of the farmers to bring their products to the buyers. What happens is they stay there, pa-process nila, magkakaroon lang ng amag.
Okay.
Yun ang kalaban natin, aflatoxin eh.
Okay.
Yun ang problema ng mga farmers. With the transport facilities available all over the country, that will solve the problem.
Very good. Yes, please.
Maganda rin. You know, I'm also, of course, supportive of this Build program kasi as I mentioned earlier, naiwanan na tayo. Talagang malaki na yung gap between supply and demand. Very basic. So, yeah, okay. So, we best wishes dito sa program.
Yeah. May pahabol. Okay. Teka muna. Walang -1 na dala eh. Pakakantahin daw sana si Asek Lambino. Kaya lang, walang -1. Walang -1. Anyway. Alam nyo, pag pinag-usapan natin yung tinamaan ng magaling na Pasig na yan, kukumbidahin natin siya. Saka si Geneva. Anyway, as they say, there is no free lunch. But you know, once we have the build, what comes next is pay. So in closing, please.
Ang layunin talaga ng Build program ay, yun na nga, pagandahin ang ating infrastruktura, make it world-class so that investors will want to come here, so that our local manufacturers, producers, farmers will have a lower cost in terms of getting their products and goods to market. Sabi nga ho nila, it costs around 40% no, of the price in the market. So talagang malaking tulong po ito sa ating mga local manufacturers, local producers, at the same time will make our country more attractive to investors. We need to invest continuously at a higher level in our infrastructure, pati ho sa manggagawang Pilipino. We need to keep investing in health and education so that we have a world-class workforce that will be attractive globally. Also, of course, a world-class workforce that will make many contributions to Philippine society. So yan po yung talagang gusto nating mangyari. At the same time, what makes this program different from programs in the past is that I think this program is particularly more equitably distributed across the regions of the country. Talaga pong makakatulong ito, hindi lang po sa ating mga malalaking syudad, pero pati sa mga probinsya at saka mga laging regions natin.
Thank you very much. Marami po nabanggit doon sa ating talakayan ngayon. But one thing is important, the government should really be consistent with its policies. Because there are some people who say that government leaders are being consistently inconsistent because what they say today will be different tomorrow. How I wish this build would really be consistent. And then he also mentioned, si Asek mentioned planting. Magandang bagay ito. I hope some of our police elements will shift to planting crops which are more beneficial to people in general and not evidence as some people allege. So we'd like to thank our guests today. Napakahalaga po ng usapan ngayon. Magandang pag-usapan ito. At kung meron pa mga katanungan, wag po kayong mag-atubili. We will invite them all over again. And we hope that DPWH and NEDA will find time to sit with us to give us a more complete picture. But with Asek, Tony Lambino, ayos na tayo eh. With Dr. Carl and Choi Alas, maliwanag ang paksang na pag-usapan. Hanggang sa ulitin, God bless us all. May God have mercy on us as a country and as a people. Thank you.